that deals. Today's Mishnah deals with judgments and the role of judges and of rabbis in offering up a judgment. And I thought we might have an interesting conversation about it today because it certainly is topical. So let's take a look at the Mishnah. Oh, before we get started, tomorrow is our rabbinic intern Deborah Magdal's speech, senior sermon at JTS. I don't know the exact time, but it overlaps this. So if we're here, we can't.
2:20.
It starts at what time? It starts at 2:20?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the link is posted on CBST's Facebook page, and so take a look. I encourage everyone. She's phenomenal as a speaker, phenomenal as an intern, and she's a friend. So we are not. The short of it is we are not meeting tomorrow. Oh, Jesse again. Jesse, it's like he's mamish an angel. He's like this guardian angel. I say something and then he. So we're not going to meet tomorrow, and I encourage everybody to come to hear Deborah. But we will pick up with Pirkei Avos next Monday. So let's take a look at the Mishnah today. And here we go. So we have here today from Rabbi Yossi, from Rabbi Shmuel Benoi, rather Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yossi. One who refrains themselves from judgment, and this means from giving to acting as a judge. A person is able to then, Pirik means to like jettison, to throw off, to remove themselves from them the yoke of Eva, which is like hatred, the gazel, thievery, robbery, ushvu hashav, and a false oath. The simple context, well, we'll finish it up. The hagas liboy, someone who is arrogant. Gas means like fat, libo of heart. So somebody, liboy gaspa is like, it's overly filled. So they translate this as someone whose heart is presumptuous in giving a judicial decision, meaning you're so eagerly desirous to adjudicate. So such a person is a shaita, they're a fool, a rasha, they're wicked, vigas ruach, and arrogant, same word. So the simple interpretation here is that when a person is acting as a judge, they're not asking for a person's, right? They're not being asked to offer their own opinion, what they think. They're being asked to offer an opinion of what does tradition, what does Judaism, what does God say about such a thing. And to be a spokesperson for God takes either being a prophet, where God is communicating directly to you, or a lot of humility to feel like the stakes are really high. Sometimes it's clear, but very often it's not clear. Reasonable people can disagree about things. And so here, if you have two people are fighting over, let's say it's even a monetary dispute. So what the Mishnah is saying, instead of saying this person owes 100 and this person, doesn't owe anything, if you can get them to be, to come together in some sort of what we call a pshara, to be able to compromise, then the person who you rule against won't hate you, because it was a process that involved all three parties. And so in thinking about what does it look like to have a win, if really two people are trying to figure out what does God want from me, so then nobody's at fault there. It's a question of, am I responsible for more? Am I responsible for less? And in that way, a person doesn't lead someone to falsely give up money that doesn't belong to them. That's why the person is preventing robbery, because if a person rules this person owes 100 and really they only owed 99, right? So by forcing them to give an extra even dollar, you've now stolen $1 from them, and that's not okay. And so the stakes are high. And so too, when it comes to making a false oath, when a person is swearing to something, a person only has to swear in cases where there's going to be a definitive ruling and it's coming to exempt oneself from something. And so sometimes there's just too much pressure or it's not clear enough. And by forcing somebody to swear, it might actually be causing the name of heaven to be desecrated. And so on one level, on the spectrum, there's this like kind of weight of recognizing what's at stake and the role that a person is taking in really as a messenger of God, right. One of God's names is Elohim, meaning God is a judge, meaning the attribute of judgment. And that's what we call judges, right? In verses, it's the same word. So it's not just about, a person is judging a wrestling match, that the person is really being kind of a representative of God in a courtroom. And so on one end of the spectrum, there should be so much fear that if you're able to resolve this where everybody's happy, then that's a win. Because in Jewish law, it's always better, when someone asks the question, it's always better to get out of the question. Because then you don't have to feel the responsibility of getting it right. You can work it out without having to take any sort of risks. And then on the other end is what it says, that a person is like, oh, what's the question? No problem. I went to rabbi school, happy to tell you what I think. So a person who's like shooting from the hip, or it's a gut reaction. So a person is evil, because these things, if it was so clear, generally, if it was so clear, they wouldn't have to end up in court. And so it's often complicated, it's often nuanced, and sometimes it's really just a function of perspective. Two people are just speaking past each other. So again, if a person is able to get people to understand the complexities and recognize that, okay, so you know what, maybe it's not 100% your fault, but you contributed, right? Okay, so you think this person's evil, you think this person is evil, but if you're able to kind of engage in a dialogue, you can recognize that actually they're seeing it just the way that you're seeing it, just from a different perspective, and as a result, you can actually bring peace in the world. Because whenever there's a doubt, the rabbis tell us that there's something unholy in that. Because, and sometimes it's just a reflection of the situation of the world. The numerical value of the word suffix, doubt, is the same as the numerical value of the word Amalek, which is, the nation that came to fight us right after the splitting of the sea. And, they basically, they're evil for a lot of reasons, but part of it is that they created doubt. Like, how do you know? And just like, how do you know, is enough to kind of, the way the rabbis describe it, is when they came to fight the Jewish people, they lost. But it's like a hot bath or a hot spring that's so hot nobody could jump into it because you would get burnt. So these people were like, oh, it's not that hot, I'll jump in. So they jumped in and they got burnt, but they cooled it down for everybody else. And instead of having that kind of space and clarity that this is dangerous, they then like kind of showed that it was possible that you could do these things in opposition to God. And so the rabbis tell us that there's no joy, like the joy of kind of the amelioration of a doubt. In simcha ka'atar sasfekus, a person, should I take this job? Should I not take this job? Should I do this? Should I do that? Like, it's a horrible place because there's a lack of clarity. And we know that God represents truth and justice. And so a lack of clarity is just simply a lack of the divine presence. When we had prophets, when we had a Kohen Gadol, high priest who would wear the breastplate that had different stones, there was a way of you had questions. There was a way in which we could get answers. Today we have questions and we don't have answers. And there are things which I think we see as being really clear and simple, but they're being questioned, and that's super scary, right? And it's complicated to try to have a conversation with somebody like that, right? Somebody says, listen, I think the world's flat. Okay, so don't go on a boat, right? But it's like hard to interface with somebody who is seeing something that is so obvious, that we think is so obvious, but it's just a different reality. And so that's also something that's very scary. And so part of the role of speaking to people who are in opposition to each other is to get them to at least acknowledge the same reality. Okay, thoughts on the Mishnah? I would love to hear what people have to say. Yes, please, Susan.
I have the type of personality where I don't like to be a judge, and I agree with a lot of this. I just have a question that maybe is simplistic, but I need a little help with. We are all made in God's image. God is a judge. God is a very good judge. We all evolve. Don't we need to try to use these skills so that we can, and judge, so that we can get closer to God? Since we're made in God's image. Is that clear?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think what the Mishnah is saying is if somebody else can judge better, you don't need to be in that space, right? Meaning it's a scary space to be in. Someone comes to you for advice, right? There's no opposition. Someone says, hey, you're a wise woman. So I'm thinking about marrying this person. I'm thinking about breaking up with this person. I'm thinking about taking this job. I'm thinking about quitting this job. So like the stakes are high. So, if you feel like, you know what, I have clarity here. Oh, this person's not good for you. It's super obvious, right? This person is fantastic for you. It's super obvious. So then, yeah. But, let's say it's not clear. I think what the Mishnah is saying, like that sense of like, by being a judge, you're actually taking a responsibility to say something as if it's true. And when we talk about things, we can say, listen, I don't know what to tell you, but like, this is what I'm hearing from you. I can reflect back. It seems to me like this, but maybe you should speak to other people, right? Like there's ways in which we can kind of like give over information and be supportive and also not feel like we're carrying that burden. But I think what the Mishnah is warning us is that if you don't feel the weight of the burden and sitting in like the chair of somebody who's a judge, so then you shouldn't be in the chair, right? Right. There's just a responsibility. I mean, I think this is true for most professions. A person's a doctor, a person's a lawyer. Like there's a responsibility in representing somebody in the field in which you're, trying to be an expert or at least competent. So when it comes to being a judge, I think what it's trying to say here is, and this is really difficult. It's hard to separate people from themselves, right? To say that differently, in rabbi school, I think the best advice I ever got was don't answer the question, answer the person, right? So even though a person is coming with a question, right, it's not the question, it's the person who's asking the question, seeing it the way in which they're seeing it. And so if a person is ruling on the question, right, a person has an ox and it gored somebody's sheep and all the technical things. So there's just something deficient in that, because at the end of the day, everyone's gonna walk away and they're gonna say like, they didn't see me, they didn't hear me. The person who adjudicated, like I wasn't there. And that's a person wants to feel seen. There's a doubt, there's a claim, there's something that motivated them to come for some sort of resolution. So I think the Mishnah is trying to give us guidance that the goal is resolution, right? The goal is some sort of like restorative religion, restorative justice, where people feel at the end, you know what? I hear what the person's saying. I probably could have acted better. I'm happy to like do my part, to try to make peace, because that's worth more than whatever is at stake here. So I think in that way, we actually are becoming more like God, because God isn't just, God's a true judge, but before there's the Midas Hadin, right, the attribute of judgment, there's this attribute of mercy, right? That's one of the reasons why in the beginning of the Genesis narrative, God has two different names deployed in that verse, right? God of Rachamim, and Rashi points out God wanted to create the world through the strict attribute of judgment, saw that it wasn't going to be able to be sustainable. So then God kind of preemptively became more merciful. And I'm sure people have heard me say this, but there's a great Sfas Emes that there's still two different lanes that were judged by God, that in the space of wanting and in the space of action. God wanted this world to be created through the strict attribute of judgment. And so when it comes to what we want, God is also strict, because how do you defend, I want to be obnoxious, I want to hurt people, I want to fall short, like I want to be unhealthy. So you want to know why I'm unhealthy? Well, because there's all you can eat buffets, and like in the world of action, there's like all sorts of things, right? So therefore also God in the world of action is merciful. So I think like in that way also, we can talk about what the law like expects of people, but then once you throw people into the equation, like people are people. Yes, Saul, please unmute yourself and love to hear what you have to say.
So two things. For many years, I represented teachers on cases that went before an arbitrator. And often when I and the person from the Department of Education made their opening statements, the arbitrator would say, listen, can't you work this out? Why don't you go out in the hallway, the two advocates, and see if you can work this out? Of course, we couldn't work out anything without the permission of the teacher I was representing and the person representing the principal of the other side. And I once did a case before an arbitrator who was Jewish about money. I made my statement, the other side made their statement. He said to me, Mr. Zalkin, how much money are you asking for? So I told him. And he said to the other side, can't we just give him half? Solomon, let's give him half.
Yeah.
So they started arguing about, no, because for whatever reason. And he said to them, I could give him the job back, and you'd have to give him all that money and more. And so they agreed, but better to work up. My other thing is, it seems that this Mishnah is tied up with his father's Mishnah, that if you dishonor the Torah, you are going to be dishonored by humankind. Nobody gets appointed to be a judge unless they have knowledge, unless the people who select judges, unless they're all crooked,
Right.
but the people who select judges say, this is a man learned, well, in those days, a man learned in Torah who knows all of the various decisions made, yada, 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 yada. So why don't we select him to be the judge here? And now you're put into a real bind, because if you if you rule and you dishonor the Torah in your ruling, then everybody hates you.
Yeah, no, it happens. It's very true, everything you're saying. I had a case once where a husband and wife came to me. The wife found out the husband did something not okay. And I happened to like them both very, very much. And they said, listen, you need to tell us who's right in this. The husband was like, it's the way of the world. It's not a big deal. And I said, look, I like you both. And I'm really afraid that you're not going to like me at the end of this, one of you. But like, sometimes you just have to be in that awkward space. But there is, I think, an ask on people who are in leadership roles, whether that's, in a human resources in a company, or to be able to recognize that the goal in an ideal space is that we should know what's right from wrong. Everybody should acknowledge it when they hear it. And as a result, be able to be friends. And more than that, even thank the person. Thank you for putting me on the right path. Thank you for letting me know that I made a mistake. I didn't realize I couldn't steal, paper clips from the office. Now that you told me, like, I understand that, and I'm really sorry. And I'm so appreciative. Like, that's what we would want. But if that's not possible, right, we'd rather speak the truth and lose friends than keep friends and now speak lies. And it's actually, again, when we learn Musar, like, we see these things in the news, and it's hard not to think that, like, they, that God is sending these kind of messages for us to be able to see negative data. Like, this is what the Mishnah says not to do, right? So, like, when the entire world knows something to be true, and people who are there and smart enough to know what is true and are saying that which is not true because they're afraid they're going to lose the friendship of somebody who they perceive as being in power. So that's what that looks like. And better to, tell the truth than lose friends if you can't tell the truth and stay friends. I think that's part of it. Yes, I see that there's a hand here somewhere.
I was just going to add, it was me.
Oh,
It was
great.
Sharon. I'm not Edith. I'm Sharon. Edith's daughter, Sharon.
No problem. Yeah, it was great to see her yesterday.
Yeah, she just got home. Otherwise, she would have been here. She had a doctor's appointment. I was just going to say that we even do that with young children in school these days. We ask them to judge, to mentor each other and come up with the solution to a problem. And I've actually sent a child out as a mediator with two other kids who are having a conflict, and come back later and let me know if they resolved it or if they couldn't. And if they couldn't, that's okay too, as you were just saying, but
Yeah.
Can you still be friends? And it's all right to have disagreed, or
Yeah.
must you like keep beating each other up?
Yeah, it's such an important lesson, and I wish more teachers and parents would instruct kids this way. Reasonable people can disagree, and you don't have to see the world exactly the same way to be friends. And it's one of the horrible things that has happened over the last 4 years is that space of being able to hold any sort of nuance in a conversation and complexity, whether it's about Israel or whether it's about American politics. There are reasonable people who think that that more guns, less gun violence. There are smart people who think that. I'm not one of them, but I know people who are good people who have many, many, many guns. I grew up in the South, in Richmond, Virginia. It's a different culture. They have a lot of guns. Okay, I don't see it that way. They're not evil for because they're just as much against gun violence as I am. They just see a different path right towards that. So but you can't. So what's one of the things that's been lost? So one of the things that I think the Mishnah is assuming that we understand is that the value of being able to coexist, especially with people who see the world differently, should be for us at least as valuable as of whatever we're fighting about. Because right, the physical piece is money, and not that it's not important, it's important, and then we have laws for that. But at the end of the day, being able to coexist with another human and to be able to have peace and come to some sort of to come to some sort of conclusion, like that's already in the spiritual realm, right? That's already in a place of trying to create harmony. So I think that's part of the tension. I think there was another hand or somebody else. Yeah, Hannah, please.
I just wonder if we could also see it in terms of not just judging as being a judge, but from the perspective of being judgmental in this respect. Would that work in here? So that if you are being just judgmental of people, that's what happens. And on the other hand, if you're being, if you're being kinder,
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know
a great
if
point.
that works here or not.
Yeah, I think these are very similar principles. In fact, one of the ideas of judging somebody favorably, right, is one of the interpretations there is that it's actually really hard not to judge people. Like you see somebody doing something, you have feelings. Like I have feelings about this. I have thoughts about this. So once we're going to be judging people because that's how people are, in part because we're creating the image of God and God is a judge, right? I think it actually comes from a place that's not bad, but there is a capacity to judge somebody favorably. You see somebody who is doing something that you think is like not okay. Maybe nobody ever told them, right? Maybe they didn't have access to, maybe they were produced in a system that, modeled horrible things. And like, they're actually, in terms of if we were raised in the way in which they were, something similar, right? So part of, I think, the judging favorably is paralleled here in that when we're judgmental, don't do it superficially. A person wants to like acknowledge something, right? We don't have to shift the line of what's acceptable. We don't have to change right from wrong, but we can be compassionate and try to understand why people are the way they are. People, as a rule, people are who they are for really good reasons, right? Generally, the more that we come to know somebody and hear their stories, the more we like kind of fits who they are. Like, oh, that makes sense. And so people are complicated, and so I think part of recognizing that we all judge is to kind of refine the way in which we do it. When we write people off because of the way in which they present or the way in which they, dress or what they do, like that's the superficial, quick to judge. When a person says, "Oh my gosh, this person, clearly must be struggling," there's got to be a story here. I wonder what I could do to be helpful. Like that's a more sophisticated, right? If you, again, it's coming from that place of feeling a sense of responsibility. I see somebody who's struggling. How responsible do I feel? If that was literally my neighbor, if that person, was somebody I grew up with, if that was somebody that, I'm related to, if that's somebody who, so like the fact that it's not necessarily I'll try to say this a little bit better. We often feel a sense of responsibility in relationship to the proximity. This is a person, a member of my community. This is a person, a member of some sort of association, affiliation of proximity. But if we think about God as being the creator of all people, so this is a child of God. If I see God as a parent, this is my sibling, right? Can I love another like I love myself, right? If I was struggling here, would I want someone to stop and help me? I hope so. So I think in that way, we can also sense that responsibility of the weightiness of recognizing the brokenness of the world is on us to fix it. And no one person can fix everything and, all the things. But at least when we see something, that we should feel that sense of like, is there something that I can do? Like, am I in a position to actually be helpful? Is this something that somebody else could help with? How can we network the resources to the needs? So I do think that's part of it. Were there any other hands? Yeah, please, Sharon.
I was just judgmental it's always had a bad connotation, but it doesn't have to really, does it?
No, a person can be discerning. Maybe that's a better word.
What? There's got to be a better word, like
discerning or
yeah.
But it's not the same.
I'm sorry.
It's not the same, discerning and judgmental.
So do we have a word that's a synonym with for judgmental? Meaning, when we think about judging something, we're weighing the two sides, right? In other words, like if we think about it in terms of a case, one person's claim is one thing, one claim. So there's the judge is meant to kind of be discerning and trying to come to a decision, figure out something. So I think in our heads we're very quick to judge where there aren't two sides. We see somebody do something and it's like, oh, that's not okay. I wouldn't do that or something. So there's something there that's missing in the process of thinking about why things are the way they are. Yeah, I'm very much open for new language or better words. But there is something negative. Well, in America, when we think about judgmentalism or being judgmental, I mean, I guess the word just means judging in our heads. If we're judging in our heads in the way in which people are supposed to be judging in court and trying to get to the truth, to be able to be productive and find some sort of harmonious ending. Thank you, Margot, for synonyms and antonyms. I think there could be something really helpful, and healthy about that. So in short, I think just the mission is trying to tell us that if we're going to be judging, then we need to feel the weight of it and feel the responsibility for it. And so if we're willing to only be in this space of kind of putting out the judgments without feeling a responsibility for it, not investing in it, so then we're in the second half of the Mishnah, which is a list of very negative things. If a person is going to put in the effort to have the thoughts, if it's worth thinking about, then it's probably worth doing something about. And in that way, then the weight of it is very real, and a person should try to think about the most efficient and productive way of trying to find some sort of resolution. So yeah, interesting mission. I've been thinking a lot about it just in terms of how disappointed and I think many people are about seeing people who we know better. We know that these are smart enough people to know right from wrong, and that when something is false, saying it more doesn't make it more true. And I think a lot of people are disappointed. I mean, I just saw a poll today. 80% of America thinks that Joe Biden won decisively, and that any sort of claims otherwise is just okay. So 20% is in the category of okay, they should count. Maybe there's something, who knows? I would like to give the benefit of the doubt. But there are people who are saying, right, that he didn't win, and it's a lie, and they know it's a lie, and it's disappointing. It's disappointing. It's very, very disappointing. Disappointing. It's not good for the world. All right, friends, let's pursue truth and name it, and God willing, we'll be meritorious to understand it, and we'll pick up next week, God willing, on Monday, and have a wonderful Shabbos. And again, tomorrow is Deborah's senior sermon at JTS. So looking forward to seeing everybody there. Have a great day, friends.